Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out an ordinary penny, and discovering it connects to one of the most dramatic years in American history. A year of change, uncertainty, and hidden stories pressed into copper. Today, we're exploring the 1964 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks simple at first glance, but carries a story far bigger than its 1 cent face value. The 1964 D Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin struck in Denver, identified by the small letter D beneath the date. It features the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Millions of Americans have handled this coin, often without a second thought. Yet for collectors, historians, and everyday people sorting through old jars of change, this penny represents a fascinating moment in U.S. history. To understand this coin, we need to go back to 1964. The United States was going through enormous changes. President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated just months earlier. The civil rights movement was reshaping the nation. The space race was accelerating, and the economy was expanding. At the same time, Americans were experiencing a serious coin shortage. People were hoarding coins, especially silver ones, because metal prices were rising and confidence in paper money was shaky. The U.S. Mint was under pressure to produce enough coins for daily commerce. Pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters were disappearing from circulation as people saved them. In response, the Mint went into overdrive. In 1964 alone, billions of pennies were produced across U.S. mints. The Denver Mint played a major role in this effort, striking a massive number of 1964 D Lincoln cents to keep the country running smoothly. Even though production numbers were huge, the story doesn't end there. The Lincoln penny design used in 1964 was already familiar, but it carried deep meaning. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909, marking the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1964, his image had been part of American life for over half a century, symbolizing unity, honesty, and resilience. During a time of national uncertainty, Lincoln's presence on everyday money offered quiet reassurance. The front of the 1964 D penny shows Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, liberty to the left, and the date to the right. Beneath the date is the small D mint mark, showing it was made in Denver. The back displays the Lincoln Memorial, with the words United States of America at the top, 1 cent at the bottom, and E pluribus unum above the memorial. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making him one of the few people ever depicted on both sides of a U.S. coin. The metal composition of the 1964 D penny is another important detail. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives the coin its rich reddish-brown color when new. This copper content is especially interesting because just a few years later, the Mint would change penny composition to reduce costs. In that sense, the 1964 penny represents the end of an era when U.S. cents were still mostly solid copper. Now let's address the big question many people ask. Is the 1964 D Lincoln penny rare or valuable? In general, most examples are common and worth only a few cents above face value. Because billions were made, circulated coins are easy to find. However, condition is everything in coin collecting. A penny that has never been used, never scratched, and never worn can be far more desirable than one that spent decades in pockets and cash registers. Uncirculated 1964 D pennies with bright original luster can sell for several dollars. Coins graded in very high condition by professional grading services have sold at auction for much more. In some cases, top-quality examples have reached prices in the hundreds or even thousands of dollars. These are not everyday coins. They are exceptional survivors that look almost exactly as they did the day they left the mint. Errors also play a big role in value. During the rush to produce coins in 1964, mistakes happened. Some 1964 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is shifted to one side. Others show doubled features, where letters or numbers appear slightly doubled due to a misaligned die. There are also pennies with cracks in the die, missing details, or unusual textures. These error coins are far scarcer than normal examples and can command strong interest from collectors. Real auction records show this clearly. While an average worn 1964 D penny might be worth only 1 or 2 cents, a sharply struck, fully read uncirculated coin can sell for $10, $20, or more. High-grade certified coins have sold for hundreds. Error coins, depending on the type and severity, can sell anywhere from $50 to several $1,000s. These prices prove that even a common date can become special under the right circumstances. Of course, whenever money is involved, people worry about fakes. Fortunately, the 1964 D penny is not commonly counterfeited because most examples are low value. Still, it's important to know what to look for. A genuine coin should weigh about 3.11 grams and stick to a magnet only very weakly, if at all, because copper is not magnetic. The details should look sharp and natural, not blurry or uneven. The mint mark should appear as part of the coin, not added later. If a coin seems unusually shiny or oddly colored, it may have been cleaned or altered, which reduces its value. One surprising fact about the 1964 penny is how many Americans still own one. Because so many were made, they often turn up in old jars, drawers, and inherited collections. People sometimes assume that only very old coins matter, but age alone does not determine value. History, condition, and story all play a role. The 1964 D penny sits at the crossroads of history and everyday life. Another fun detail is that 1964 was the last year the U.S. Mint used that exact penny design without interruption until later changes. While the Lincoln Memorial design continued, the era around 1964 marks the end of classic copper coinage. Holding this penny is like holding a small piece of pre-modern America before major changes in money, technology, and society. Collectors today love the 1964 D Lincoln penny for several reasons. It's affordable, accessible, and rich in history. New collectors can easily find one and begin learning about grading, mint marks, and errors. Experienced collectors appreciate the challenge of finding a perfect example or a rare mistake. And history lovers enjoy the connection to a pivotal year in the American story. This coin also reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Something small and ordinary can carry meaning far beyond its appearance. A penny that once bought a piece of candy now tells a story of national change, industrial effort, and human hands working around the clock to keep a country moving. So the next time you come across a 1964 D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check its condition. Examine its details. Think about where it's been and what it represents. You may not be holding a fortune, but you are holding a genuine piece of American history, quietly waiting to be noticed. And who knows? In a jar of loose change, a single coin with the right detail, the right shine, or the right mistake could still surprise you. That's the magic of coin collecting. Every coin has a story, and sometimes that story begins with a simple penny dated 1964. Imagine pulling a simple penny from your pocket and realizing it carries a hidden story from one of the most turbulent decades in American history. A coin so ordinary at first glance, yet quietly shaped by war, rising prices, and a changing nation. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1968 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, and why collectors still pay close attention to this small piece of copper. The 1968 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint and struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries a small D mint mark below the date. At first look, it seems like just another Lincoln cent, similar to millions still in circulation today. But this coin comes from a very important turning point in U.S. coin history, a time when the government was struggling to keep coins in everyday use without losing money making them. To understand this penny, we need to go back to the year 1968. The United States was deep into the Vietnam War. Inflation was rising. The price of metals, especially copper, was climbing fast. People were starting to hoard coins, believing the metal inside them might soon be worth more than their face value. This caused a serious coin shortage across the country. Vending machines, payphones, and everyday businesses were affected because there simply were not enough coins in circulation. The U.S. Mint was under pressure to produce massive quantities of coins quickly and efficiently. In response, they brought back mint marks on pennies in 1968 after removing them for several years. From 1965 through 1967, no U.S. coins carried mint marks, as part of an effort to discourage coin collecting and hoarding. But by 1968, that policy ended, and the Denver Mint once again proudly marked its pennies with a D. The design of the 1968 D penny follows the classic Lincoln cent style that Americans had known for decades. On the front, or obverse, is the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, making it one of the longest-running designs in U.S. coinage history. On the back or reverse, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been in use since 1959. Above the memorial are the words E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. The inscriptions, United States of America, and 1 cent frame the building. Hidden between the columns of the memorial is a tiny image of Lincoln himself, making this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. The metal composition of the 1968 D penny is especially important. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the traditional bronze alloy used for pennies for most of the 20th century. This was before the major shift in 1982, when pennies began being made mostly of zinc with a thin copper coating. As a result, the 1968 D penny feels slightly heavier and has a warmer, richer color than modern pennies. More than 2 billion Lincoln pennies were minted in Denver in 1968. That means this coin is not rare in general circulation. Many people alive today probably spent dozens of them without ever noticing. However, value in coin collecting is not just about how many were made. Condition, errors, and special varieties play a huge role. Most 1968 D pennies that have been heavily circulated are worth only face value, but coins in excellent condition can be worth more. A penny that still has its original red copper color, with sharp details and no wear, can be desirable to collectors. These are often referred to as red pennies, and they are far less common than worn brown ones. Some of the most interesting and valuable 1968 D pennies are those with minting errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the coin production process, and the mint did not catch it before the coin entered circulation. These mistakes can turn an ordinary penny into a collector's item. One known error is the doubled die penny. This occurs when the coin design is accidentally impressed twice at slightly different angles, causing letters or numbers to appear doubled. On a 1968 D penny, doubling may be visible on the date, the word Liberty, or the motto, In God We Trust. Genuine doubled die errors are scarce and can be worth significantly more than normal examples. Another type of error is an off-center strike, where the coin design is not properly aligned on the blank. These coins may show part of the design missing, while a blank crescent appears on one side. Depending on how dramatic the error is, these can sell for tens or even hundreds of dollars. There are also pennies struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the coin was made on a metal blank intended for a different denomination. These are extremely rare, but when they do appear, they can command strong interest from collectors. When it comes to real-world value, most 1968 D pennies sell for just a few cents if they are circulated. However, uncirculated examples graded by professional services can sell for higher amounts. High-grade coins with bright red surfaces have sold at auction for several dollars, and in some cases, well over $10. Error coins can sell for much more, depending on the type and severity of the mistake. If you think you might have a valuable 1968 D penny, identification is important. First, check the date and look for the small d below it. Then examine the coin's condition. Sharp details, minimal wear, and strong color are good signs. Use a magnifying glass to look closely at the lettering and numbers for any doubling or unusual shapes. Weight can also help. A genuine 1968 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A digital scale can help confirm this. Be cautious of coins that look altered or damaged, as post-mint damage does not increase value. Real errors happen during the minting process, not after the coin leaves the mint. One surprising fact about the 1968 penny is how close it came to being made with cheaper metals. Just a few years later, the mint would seriously explore aluminum and other alternatives to copper. The 1968 D penny represents the final years of the classic copper cent that many collectors love today. Collectors are drawn to this coin not because it is flashy or rare at first glance, but because it represents a moment of change. It comes from a time when the U.S. Mint was adapting to economic pressure, public behavior, and rising costs. It is a reminder that even the smallest coin can reflect big national challenges. Today, collectors enjoy the 1968 D Lincoln penny as part of complete date and mint mark sets, error collections, and high-grade copper cent albums. It is affordable, accessible, and still possible to find in old jars, rolls, and inherited collections. That sense of possibility keeps people searching. So the next time you come across a 1968 penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it for a moment. Think about the year it was made, the hands it passed through, and the history it quietly witnessed. Sometimes, the most interesting stories in coin collecting begin with the smallest change. If you have a penny from 1972 sitting in a jar or drawer, you might be holding something far more interesting than spare change, because one tiny detail on that coin has made collectors stop, stare, and sometimes pay serious money for it. Today we're talking about the 1972 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance but hides a fascinating story, a famous error, and a reason why millions of people still check their change more than 50 years later. The 1972 Lincoln penny without a mint mark was made in Philadelphia, at a time when the U.S. Mint did not place a P mint mark on pennies. So if your 1972 penny has no letter under the date, that's exactly how it was supposed to be. This coin features Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design that was familiar to Americans for decades. To understand why this penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1970s. The United States was going through major changes. The Vietnam War was ongoing, inflation was rising, and the cost of metals was becoming a serious concern for the government. Despite all this, the Lincoln cent remained a daily use coin, produced in huge numbers to keep up with demand. In 1972, the Philadelphia Mint struck more than 2 billion Lincoln pennies. That is an enormous number, and it's the reason many people assume the coin is worthless. After all, how could something made by the billions be special? The answer lies not in how many were made, but in how a small number of them were made differently. The standard 1972 no mint mark penny is made mostly of copper. At that time, pennies were composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them a solid weight and a warm reddish-brown color when new. This was just before the mint would later change the penny's composition to save money, which already makes Pennies 1,982 cents more appealing to collectors. On the front of the coin, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" along the top, Liberty on the left, and the date on the right. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands in the center, with United States of America and 1 cent clearly visible. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. So far, everything sounds normal, but here's where the story gets interesting. In 1972, a small number of pennies were struck using a misaligned or doubled die. This means the metal stamp used to strike the coin was improperly made, causing the design to appear doubled. This is not damage and not wear. It happened at the mint, and it happened before the coin ever entered circulation. The most famous version is known as the 1972 doubled die obverse penny. On these coins, the doubling is clearly visible to the naked eye, especially on the date, the word Liberty, and the phrase "In God We Trust." The letters look thicker, almost like shadows or echoes, and once you see a real one, it's hard to forget. This error was not discovered immediately. Pennies were released into circulation, mixed with normal coins, and spent in everyday transactions. Some were lost, some were worn down, and some were saved by people who noticed something unusual. This is what makes the 1972 no mint mark penny so exciting. Most are common, but a very small percentage are dramatically different, and those differences can mean real value. A normal 1972 no mint mark penny, if it's worn and circulated, is usually worth just a few cents. Even in nice condition, it might only be worth a small premium. But the doubled die version is in a completely different category. Collectors consider the 1972 doubled die obverse penny one of the strongest and most dramatic doubled dies ever released into circulation. Because of that, demand has stayed high for decades. In circulated condition, genuine examples have sold for hundreds of dollars. In higher grades, with sharp details and minimal wear, prices can climb into the thousands. Some top-quality examples, graded by professional services, have sold at auction for well over $10,000. These are real sales, not rumors. Coin auction records show strong and consistent demand for this variety, especially when the doubling is bold and easy to see. So how can you tell if you might have a valuable one? First, look at the date. On a doubled die coin, the numbers in 1972 will appear doubled, especially the 2. Next, examine the word Liberty. The letters may look thick or slightly separated. Then check "In God We Trust." This is often where the doubling is strongest and easiest to spot. It's important to understand what doubling looks like. Real doubled die coins show clean, rounded doubling that matches the original design. If the coin just looks blurry, flat, or damaged, it's probably not the real thing. Many coins show machine doubling or wear, which does not add value. If you believe you found a true doubled die, the best step is to have it examined by a reputable coin dealer or sent to a professional grading service. This can confirm authenticity and protect the coin's value. Counterfeits do exist, especially for famous error coins like this one. Some people alter normal pennies by engraving or reshaping letters. Others try to pass off common doubling as something rare. That's why expert verification matters. One surprising fact about the 1972 penny is that multiple double die varieties exist, but only one is considered the major, valuable version. This means not every doubled-looking 1972 penny is worth big money. Knowledge is the key difference between disappointment and discovery. Another interesting detail is that this error happened during a time of high production pressure at the mint. Speed and volume were priorities, and quality control sometimes missed subtle problems. That environment helped create some of the most famous error coins in U.S. history. Collectors love the 1972 no mint mark penny because it combines accessibility with excitement. It's a coin many people remember using, yet it carries the thrill of hidden value. You don't need a gold vault or a family inheritance to find one. It could still be sitting in an old coffee can, a childhood collection, or even a forgotten roll of pennies. This coin also represents a moment just before major changes in U.S. coinage. The copper content, the classic Lincoln memorial design, and the lack of a mint mark all place it firmly in a bygone era. Today, collectors continue to search for high-quality examples, especially those with clear doubling and minimal wear. As time passes, fewer survive in top condition, which keeps demand strong. Even if you never find the rare version, learning to look closely at a simple penny changes the way you see everyday objects. It reminds us that history, mistakes, and value can hide in plain sight. So the next time you come across a 1972 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Tilt it in the light. Study the letters and numbers. Because sometimes, the smallest details are what turn an ordinary coin into a piece of American history that collectors will always care about. And who knows? The next penny you examine might be the one that makes you see pocket change in a whole new way. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet quietly holds a story tied to America's 200th birthday. A coin millions have seen, but very few have truly understood. Today, we're uncovering the surprising story behind the 1976 D mint mark Lincoln penny and why collectors still pay close attention to it. At first glance, the 1976 D Lincoln penny doesn't look special. It's small, copper-colored, and familiar. Most people have spent one without a second thought. But this coin was struck during one of the most important years in American history, the bicentennial era, when the nation celebrated 200 years of independence. That historical timing alone gives this penny a deeper meaning than its face value suggests. This coin is a Lincoln 1-cent piece struck in 1976 at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark just below the date on the front. It features Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, a design Americans have known since 1909. On the reverse, it still carries the Lincoln Memorial design, which had been in use since 1959. While other U.S. coins in 1976 received special bicentennial designs, the penny did not. And that decision is part of what makes this coin interesting today. To understand this penny, we need to step back into the mid-1970s. The United States was going through a time of reflection and change. The Vietnam War had recently ended, inflation was high, and the country was looking for reasons to feel united again. The bicentennial celebration in 1976 became a powerful symbol of national pride. Special designs appeared on quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins, but the penny stayed the same. It remained simple, steady, and familiar, just like Lincoln himself. The Denver Mint produced an enormous number of 1976 pennies. Over 4 billion were struck there alone. Because of this, many people assume the coin has no value beyond 1 cent. And in most cases, that's true. But coin collecting isn't just about how many were made. It's about condition, details, and mistakes that slipped through during production. The 1976 D Lincoln penny is made mostly of copper. By this time, Pennies were no longer solid copper like earlier coins. Instead, they were composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, a composition that was soon to change again in the early 1980s. This makes the 1976 penny one of the last issues in the heavier, copper-rich era, which many collectors appreciate. Design-wise, the coin features Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Lincoln. Look closely, and you'll see fine details in Lincoln's hair, coat, and facial features. On well-preserved examples, these details remain sharp and clear. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial shows tiny columns, and if the coin is struck well, you can even see Lincoln's statue inside the building. So why would anyone care about such a common coin? The answer lies in errors and condition. While billions were made, only a small number survived in pristine, uncirculated condition. Even fewer were struck with noticeable minting errors. Some 1976 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is shifted away from the center of the coin. Others show doubled dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. There are also examples with die cracks, clipped planchets, or weak strikes. These errors are not common, and collectors actively search for them. Condition plays an even bigger role. Most 1976 pennies were heavily circulated. They were used in daily transactions, tossed into jars, and forgotten in drawers. Finding one today with full mint luster, no wear, and strong details is surprisingly difficult. Coins graded in top condition by professional grading services can sell for far more than 1 cent. At auction, a typical circulated 1976 D penny is worth exactly 1 cent. But uncirculated examples can sell for several dollars. High-grade coins, especially those graded MS-67 or higher, have sold for tens or even hundreds of dollars. Error coins can bring even more, depending on the type and severity of the mistake. There have been documented sales where rare error versions of the 1976 D penny sold for several $100s. These aren't everyday finds, but they prove that even common coins can carry hidden value when the right combination of rarity and condition is present. Identifying a genuine 1976 D Lincoln penny is fairly simple. Start by checking the date and the mint mark. The date should read 1976, and the D mint mark should appear just below it on the front of the coin. The weight should be about 3.11 grams. The color should be a natural copper tone, not overly shiny or artificially bright. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people attempt to modify dates or add mint marks to make coins appear more valuable. Under magnification, fake mint marks often look glued or oddly shaped. Genuine mint marks are smooth and integrated into the coin's surface. If you suspect a valuable error or high-grade coin, professional authentication is always recommended. One surprising fact about the 1976 penny is how it connects to American memory. Millions of people alive today were children or young adults when it was minted. For them, this coin represents a time of celebration, parades, fireworks, and national pride. That emotional connection adds a layer of appeal that numbers alone can't explain. Another interesting detail is that while the penny didn't receive a bicentennial design, it still circulated alongside the special 1776-1976 coins. That makes it part of the same historical moment, even if it didn't get the spotlight. Collectors today love the 1976 D Lincoln penny not because it's rare, but because it's accessible. Anyone can search for one. It invites beginners into the hobby while still offering challenges for advanced collectors hunting high-grade or error examples. It proves that coin collecting isn't only about expensive rarities. It's about history, curiosity, and the thrill of discovery. This coin reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closer. A simple penny can open the door to learning about American history, minting technology, and the small imperfections that make each coin unique. So the next time you come across a 1976 D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over, look at the details. Think about the year it was made and the hands it may have passed through. Because even the most ordinary coin can carry an extraordinary story. And if you're curious what other everyday coins might be hiding quiet secrets like this one, you may want to start checking your change a little more carefully. You never know what piece of history might already be in your pocket. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance. It looks ordinary, almost forgettable. But what if I told you that a simple 1977 Lincoln penny, The kind that may still be hiding in old jars or drawers has details that quietly fascinate collectors and, in certain cases, can be worth far more than 1 cent. This is the story of the 1977 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that represents an entire era of American history, everyday life, and surprising collector interest. The coin we are talking about today is the 1977 Lincoln 1 cent coin with no mint mark. When a Lincoln penny from this year has no mint mark, it means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For decades, Philadelphia-produced pennies did not carry a mint mark at all. So this small absence of a letter tells us exactly where it was born. At first glance, this penny seems simple. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait faces right on the front, just as it had since 1909. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that defined American pennies for nearly 50 years. But to truly understand this coin, we need to step back into the world of 1977. The year 1977 was a time of change and challenge in the United States. The country was recovering from the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. Inflation was high, gas prices were rising, and everyday Americans were carefully counting their change. Pennies were still widely used, and billions were struck each year to keep commerce moving. In 1977, the U.S. Mint produced a massive number of Lincoln pennies. Philadelphia alone struck well over 4 billion cents that year. These coins were made for daily use, not for collectors. They passed through hands at grocery stores, gas stations, and movie theaters. Few people imagined that decades later, collectors would examine them closely under magnification. The design of the 1977 penny followed a long tradition. On the front, Abraham Lincoln appears in a dignified profile designed by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty. In front of his face is the date, 1977. Just behind him are the words "In God We Trust." This design had already become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. The reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. This level of detail is remarkable for a 1 cent coin meant for everyday use. The metal composition of the 1977 penny is also important. It is made primarily of copper, about 95% copper, with the remaining portion being zinc and tin. This was before the major shift to copper-plated zinc pennies that began in the early 1980s. As a result, the 1977 penny feels slightly heavier and has a richer tone than modern cents. So with billions made, why does this penny matter to collectors at all? The answer lies in condition, errors, and small details that separate ordinary coins from special ones. While most 1977 no-mint mark pennies are only worth a few cents today, certain examples stand out dramatically. Condition is the first key factor. Most of these pennies were heavily circulated. They show scratches, dull surfaces, and worn details. But a 1977 penny that has never been used, known as an uncirculated coin, is far more desirable. Coins with bright original luster, sharp details, and no signs of wear are increasingly hard to find as time goes on. Then there are mint errors. These are mistakes that happen during the coin's production, and they are where things get truly interesting. Some 1977 pennies show doubled dies, where the design appears slightly doubled, especially in the lettering or date. Others may have off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or weak strikes that give the coin a unique look. One of the most talked-about errors for this year is the doubled die obverse. In these cases, the words "Liberty" or "In God We Trust" may appear slightly doubled when viewed closely. These errors were not intentional, and that makes them fascinating to collectors. Because errors are unpredictable, only a small number exist compared to the billions of normal coins. This rarity is what drives collector demand. Now let's talk about real value. A typical circulated 1977 no-mint mark penny is usually worth 1 to 3 cents. It's a common coin, and there's no reason to pay much more for a worn example. However, uncirculated coins can sell for several dollars, especially if they are well preserved. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services can reach much higher prices. In top condition, with full original luster and no visible flaws, some 1977 pennies have sold at auction for over $100. Error coins, depending on the type and clarity of the mistake, can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s. Collectors have paid strong prices for dramatic double dies or clean off-center strikes from this year. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist, and they are still being discovered. Of course, whenever a coin gains attention, questions about authenticity follow. Fortunately, the 1977 no mint mark penny is difficult to fake because it is not a rare date by itself. Still, it's important to know what to look for. First, check the weight. A genuine 1977 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A significant difference could be a red flag. Next, examine the color. Because it is mostly copper, it should have a warm brown or reddish tone, not a gray or silvery color. Look closely at the details. The lettering should be sharp and clean, not blurry or misshapen. If you believe you have an error coin, compare it with a known normal example from the same year. Differences should be clear and consistent, not random damage. For higher value coins, professional authentication is always recommended. Grading services can confirm whether a coin is genuine and whether an error is real or just damage. Beyond value, the 1977 penny has some fun and surprising details. For example, many people don't realize that pennies from this era contain more copper than modern ones. With rising copper prices over the years, this fact alone has sparked interest, even though melting coins is illegal. Another interesting detail is how many of these pennies were saved unintentionally. During the late 1970s, some Americans began hoarding copper cents, thinking they might be valuable someday. As a result, unopened rolls of 1977 pennies still exist, waiting to be searched. Collectors also enjoy the challenge of finding the best possible example of a common coin. This is known as condition rarity. Even though the coin itself is common, finding one in near-perfect condition is not. Today, collectors love the 1977 no mint mark penny because it represents a time when coins were still made mostly of copper and used every day. It's a reminder of pocket change from a different era, before digital payments and contactless cards. For beginners, this coin is an accessible entry point into coin collecting. It's easy to find, affordable, and full of small details that reward careful observation. For experienced collectors, it offers the thrill of the hunt, searching for that one exceptional example hiding among thousands of ordinary ones. The 1977 Lincoln penny may never be the most famous or expensive coin in American history, but its story is deeply American. It connects everyday life, history, craftsmanship, and the quiet excitement of discovery. So the next time you see a worn brown penny dated 1977 with no mint mark, pause for a moment. Turn it over in your hand. Look a little closer. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking coins carry the most interesting stories, and occasionally, a small surprise that's been waiting for decades to be found. What if the most important penny in your pocket isn't the oldest one, but the one that quietly changed American money forever? A single cent from 1982 did exactly that, and most people have no idea why it still matters today. This video is about the 1982 D mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but sits at the center of one of the biggest turning points in U.S. coin history. It's a penny many Americans have owned, spent, or ignored, yet collectors still study it closely, and some examples are worth far more than 1 cent. The coin we're talking about is a Lincoln 1-cent piece struck in 1982 at the Denver Mint. The small letter D below the date tells us it was made in Denver, Colorado. While millions were produced, this year was anything but normal for the U.S. Mint, and that is what makes this penny special. To understand why the 1982 D penny matters, we need to step back for a moment. By the early 1980s, the cost of making a penny was becoming a serious problem. For decades, Lincoln cents were made mostly of copper. In fact, from 1909 until 1982, pennies were about 95% copper. But copper prices began rising sharply in the late 1970s and early 1980s. At one point, the metal inside a penny was worth more than the penny itself. This created a real issue. If it costs more than 1 cent to make 1 cent, the system doesn't work. So in 1982, the U.S. Mint made a historic decision. They changed the composition of the penny. Instead of being mostly copper, new pennies would be made from zinc, with only a very thin outer layer of copper. That makes 1982 a crossover year. It's the year when copper pennies ended and zinc pennies began. No other year has this distinction in the same way, and the Denver Mint played a unique role in this transition. The 1982 D Mint Mark penny was struck during this changeover. Denver-produced pennies from this year are officially zinc-based, weighing about 2.5 grams instead of the older copper weight of about 3.1 grams. That difference may sound small, but to collectors, it means everything. The design of the coin itself remained familiar. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln, based on the classic portrait created by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God we trust." The word liberty appears on the left, and the date 1982 sits to the right. Just below the date is the D Mint mark, identifying the Denver Mint. On the reverse, you see the Lincoln Memorial, which was used on pennies from 1959 through 2008. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln, making this one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. So if the design didn't change, what makes this coin interesting? The answer lies in the metal, the timing, and the unexpected details that came with a year of transition. In 1982, the U.S. Mint produced multiple varieties of pennies. There were large date and small date versions, copper and zinc versions, and coins from different mints. This created confusion at the time, and even today, many people don't realize how many variations exist. For the Denver Mint specifically, official records say that all 1982 D pennies were struck on zinc planchets. That means they should all be the lighter, newer metal type. But here's where the mystery begins. Over the years, collectors have reported finding 1982 D pennies that weigh the same as copper cents. If true, that would mean a small number were accidentally struck on leftover copper blanks. These would be extremely rare errors, the kind that can turn a common-looking penny into a life-changing discovery. While such coins are not officially confirmed in large numbers, the possibility alone has kept collectors checking their change for decades. And even zinc versions can be valuable if they show certain errors or are preserved in exceptional condition. Most 1982 D pennies are worth only 1 cent in everyday condition, but value changes quickly when condition improves. A bright, uncirculated example that has never been spent can be worth several dollars. Coins graded by professional services in high mint state condition can sell for significantly more, especially if they show sharp details and clean surfaces. Error coins are where prices can jump dramatically. Off-center strikes, doubled lettering, weak strikes, or planchet errors can all increase value. Even small mistakes can attract strong interest from collectors who specialize in modern coin errors. There have been auction sales where high-grade 1982 D pennies sold for hundreds of dollars. Error examples have sold for more. These aren't everyday prices, but they are real sales that show how a simple penny can become desirable under the right circumstances. So how do you tell what you have? The first step is weight. A simple digital scale can tell you a lot. A zinc penny weighs about 2.5 grams, a copper penny weighs about 3.1 grams. If you ever find a 1982 D penny that weighs close to 3.1 grams, that coin deserves professional attention immediately. Next, look closely at the date. There are small date and large date styles from 1982, though the Denver Mint is most commonly associated with the large date. Comparing your coin to verified images can help, but this step takes practice. Check the color and sound. Copper pennies tend to have a deeper, warmer tone and make a slightly different sound when dropped compared to zinc pennies, which often sound duller. This is not a scientific test, but it can provide clues. Be cautious of fakes or altered coins. Some people plate zinc pennies with copper to imitate rarer versions. Others modify dates or mint marks. Real coins will show natural wear, correct weight, and consistent details. When in doubt, a reputable coin dealer or grading service is the safest route. One fun fact about the 1982 penny is that many Americans unknowingly saved copper cents when the metal change was announced. People hoarded older pennies, believing copper prices would keep rising. As a result, zinc pennies like the 1982 D became more common in circulation than expected. Another interesting detail is that 1982 is the last year you can realistically find both copper and zinc Lincoln cents in everyday change, depending on mint and variety. After that, copper cents disappear completely from new production. Collectors love the 1982 D penny not because it is flashy or famous, but because it represents a moment when American money quietly changed. It's a coin tied to economics, inflation, metal markets, and government decision-making, all wrapped into a simple 1-cent piece. For newer collectors, it's an accessible entry point into understanding varieties, mint marks, and errors. For experienced collectors, it's a reminder that even modern coins can hold secrets. The next time you see a 1982 penny with a small D under the date, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it for a moment. Weigh it. Look at it closely. That tiny coin carries the story of the end of copper pennies in the United States and the beginning of a new era. And who knows? Somewhere out there, one of these pennies may still be waiting to surprise the person who finally takes a second look. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that looks ordinary, but quietly carries a story most people never notice. A coin that millions have handled, yet very few have ever truly looked at. Today, we're uncovering the truth behind the 1987 no mint mark Lincoln penny, and why this small copper-colored coin still sparks curiosity among collectors decades later. The 1987 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck in the United States and still commonly found in circulation today. At first glance, it doesn't appear rare, flashy, or special. There is no unusual date. There is no dramatic design change. And yet this penny represents an important moment in modern American coinage, one that connects everyday pocket change to history, manufacturing changes, and the hidden world of coin collecting. In 1987, the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies each year. The country needed small change for daily commerce, and the Lincoln cent remained the backbone of American coinage. The penny you're looking at features Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1987, Lincoln had already been on the penny for nearly 8 decades, making it one of the longest-running portrait designs in U.S. history. When a 1987 penny has no mint mark, it means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Unlike other U.S. mints, Philadelphia traditionally did not use a mint mark on pennies during this time. Coins from Denver carry a small D, and those from San Francisco usually feature an S, so the absence of a letter under the date is not a mistake. It's actually the clue that tells you exactly where it was made. The year 1987 itself sits quietly in the middle of a major transition period for U.S. pennies. Just a few years earlier, in 1982, the mint changed the composition of the penny due to rising copper prices. Before that, pennies were made mostly of copper. After the change, they became zinc coins coated with a thin layer of copper. By 1987, all regular Lincoln pennies were made using this newer copper-plated zinc formula. That means a 1987 penny is much lighter than older copper cents. It weighs about 2.5 grams instead of the older 3.11 grams. This shift wasn't about design or appearance. It was about cost. The mint needed to keep the penny affordable to produce, and zinc made that possible. This behind-the-scenes decision quietly reshaped modern coinage, and the 1987 penny is part of that story. The design of the 1987 Lincoln penny remains classic and familiar. On the front, Lincoln faces to the right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, liberty to the left, and the date to the right. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design that ran from 1959 until 2008. If you look closely at the memorial, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, making it one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. So if millions were made, why do people still talk about the 1987 no mint mark penny? The answer lies not in rarity by date, but in condition, errors, and human curiosity. Most 1987 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, but collectors don't look at coins the way most people do. They look for perfection, mistakes, and stories frozen in metal. One of the most important factors in value is condition. A 1987 penny that has never been circulated, meaning it has no wear, no scratches, and full original shine, can be worth more than face value. Coins like these are graded by professional services and sealed in protective holders. In top condition, some 1987 no mint mark pennies have sold for modest but real premiums, especially when they achieve very high mint state grades. Then there are errors. This is where things get interesting. While the date itself isn't rare, certain 1987 pennies left the mint with mistakes. These can include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, doubled lettering caused by die errors, or clipped planchets where part of the coin is missing due to a cutting mistake. These errors are not common, and when verified, they can significantly increase value. There have been documented auction sales where 1987 pennies with clear mint errors sold for anywhere from $20 to several $100s, depending on the type and severity of the error. While these prices won't make anyone rich overnight, they demonstrate that even modern pennies can become collectible when something unusual happens during production. Of course, with any collectible, authenticity matters. A real 1987 no-mint mark penny should weigh about 2.5 grams and have a zinc core visible if the copper plating is damaged. It should respond to a magnet test by not sticking, since neither copper nor zinc is magnetic. Be cautious of altered coins where mint marks have been removed. On genuine Philadelphia pennies, there was never a mint mark to begin with, so there should be no sign of tampering beneath the date. Collectors also pay attention to detail. The lettering should be clean and evenly shaped. The edge should be smooth, without unusual seams. And the color should match what you'd expect from copper-plated zinc, usually a bright orange red when new, fading to brown with age. One surprising fact about the 1987 penny is just how many still survive in excellent condition. Because these coins are relatively modern, many were saved in rolls or collections straight from the bank. This makes high-quality examples more available than older coins, but it also creates competition among collectors who seek the very best specimens. Another fun detail is that the 1987 penny comes from an era when pennies were already being debated. Even then, people questioned whether the 1-cent coin was worth producing at all. Despite this, the mint continued striking billions, and the penny survived. Today, that ongoing debate adds another layer of interest for collectors who see these coins as symbols of persistence in American currency. Collectors love the 1987 no-mint mark penny not because it's rare, but because it's relatable. It reminds people that collecting doesn't always start with expensive coins. Sometimes it starts with looking more closely at what you already have. It's a coin that invites beginners into the hobby while still offering enough depth for experienced collectors who enjoy hunting for errors and high-grade examples. This penny also represents the idea that history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it sits quietly in your change jar, waiting for someone curious enough to ask questions. It reflects a moment in U.S. minting history where efficiency, tradition, and everyday life intersected. So the next time you see a 1987 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it for a moment. Look at Lincoln's face, the memorial on the back, and the simple date. You may be holding a coin that traveled through countless hands, witnessed decades of change, and still carries a small but meaningful story. And if this ordinary-looking penny can have layers of history beneath its surface, imagine what other unnoticed coins might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone like you to take a closer look. What if the penny hiding in your pocket right now is more interesting than you ever imagined? A simple brown coin, often ignored, could carry a story of American history, hidden details, and in rare cases, surprising value. Today, we're taking a close look at the 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin most people have seen, but very few truly understand. The 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark is a 1-cent coin made in the United States and released into everyday circulation. The words "no mint mark" simply mean it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not place a mint mark on pennies during that time. Millions of Americans handled this coin without a second thought, using it for change at grocery stores, gas stations, and vending machines. Yet behind its ordinary appearance is a story tied to American industry, design tradition, and collector curiosity. To understand this penny, we need to go back to the year 1988. The United States was in the late Cold War era. The economy was growing and cash was still king. Credit cards were common, but coins were essential for daily life. The U.S. Mint produced enormous numbers of pennies every year to meet demand, and in 1988, the Lincoln cent was already a familiar symbol of American money. The Lincoln penny itself has a much longer history. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. By 1988, the design had been in use for nearly 8 decades, making it one of the most recognizable coins in the country. The front still showed Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner, while the back displayed the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been used since 1959. By the late 1980s, pennies were no longer made mostly of copper. Rising metal prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition in 1982. The 1988 penny is made of a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper. It looks like copper on the outside, but inside it is mostly zinc. This change allowed the mint to keep producing pennies at a lower cost, even though each coin was still worth just 1 cent. If you examine a 1988 no-mint mark penny closely, you'll notice familiar details. Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head. The word "liberty" appears to the left, and the date 1988 sits on the right. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands proudly, with United States of America across the top and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look very carefully, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, a detail many people never notice. So why would anyone care about a penny like this? After all, billions were made. The truth is that most 1988 no-mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. They are common coins that still turn up in pocket change today. However, the world of coin collecting is not just about age. Condition, rarity, and mistakes play a huge role in value. One reason collectors pay attention to the 1988 penny is condition. Coins that were never circulated, meaning they were never used in everyday transactions, can survive in nearly perfect shape. These are known as uncirculated coins. A 1988 penny with bright red color, sharp details, and nowhere can be far more desirable than one that is dark, scratched, or worn down. Professional grading services evaluate coins and assign them grades. In very high grades, such as Mint State 67 or higher, a 1988 no-mint mark penny can sell for hundreds of dollars. These coins are rare not because few were made, but because so few survived in flawless condition after decades of handling, storage, and exposure to the environment. Another factor that can make a 1988 penny valuable is mint errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the manufacturing process. These mistakes are usually caught and destroyed, but a small number slip through and enter circulation. When they do, collectors take notice. Some 1988 pennies have been found with off-center strikes, where the design is not properly centered on the coin. Others may show doubled images, where letters or numbers appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during striking. There are also broad strikes, where the coin spreads out wider than normal because it was struck without a proper collar. These error coins can be worth anywhere from tens to hundreds of dollars, depending on how dramatic the error is and how well the coin is preserved. Real auction records help separate myth from reality. While you may see claims online of ordinary 1988 pennies being worth thousands of dollars, verified sales tell a more realistic story. Certified high-grade examples of the 1988 no-mint mark penny have sold at auction for a few $100s. Error coins from the same year, especially those clearly visible to the naked eye, have also sold for strong prices among collectors who specialize in mint mistakes. Knowing how to identify a genuine 1988 no-mint mark penny is important. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1988 with no signs of alteration. Altered dates are one of the most common types of coin fraud. Next, look below the date. If there is no letter such as a D or S, then it was struck in Philadelphia. The coin should weigh about 2.5 grams and should not be attracted to a magnet. A magnetic penny is a red flag and likely not genuine. The surface of a real 1988 penny should show a copper color, though it may range from bright red to brown depending on age and wear. Be cautious of coins that look unusually shiny or plated, as some people coat pennies to make them appear special when they are not. There are also some fun and surprising facts about this coin. Even though it looks solid, the zinc core means that once the copper coating is damaged, the coin can corrode quickly. That's why many 1980s and 1990s pennies show bubbling or rough surfaces. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln Memorial design would only remain for a few more years. In 2009, it was replaced, making coins like the 1988 penny part of the final decades of a long-running design era. Collectors today appreciate the 1988 no-mint mark penny not because it is rare in everyday terms, but because it represents a specific moment in U.S. minting history. It reflects changes in metal composition, mass production, and the balance between cost and tradition. For new collectors, it's an affordable entry point. For experienced collectors, it's a challenge to find in top condition or with unusual errors. The real excitement comes from the possibility. Every roll of pennies, every jar of old change carries the chance of finding something better than expected. Most of the time, you'll find common coins. But once in a while, a sharply struck, beautifully preserved 1988 penny appears, or an error that makes you stop and look twice. So the next time you see a 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over in your hand. Look at the details. Think about where it's been and how many hands it passed through. Even the most ordinary coin can carry a story, and sometimes that story is worth far more than 1 cent.